everybody, and welcome to Heathen Talk Season 2, Episode 3. We're excited to be here. Tonight, we are talking about misconceptions around the gods, and we'll probably branch off into misconceptions and heathenry in general, because it seems to have been a topic this week inadvertently. As you can see, there's only two of us. Torin has decided to abandon us for somewhere where he's dressing funny, drinking beer, and maybe possibly watching people hit each other with sticks. And Matt has gone with him, so if you were and you're not seeing familiar faces, that's why when they do come back next week.
I feel like this is almost like a throwback episode. Well, there we go, to the original episode when it was just you and me, and then Torin invaded. So
that's true, and
that is kind of how it works.
I don't think we're going to get Torin invading unless he manages to find some signal out where he is.
And are they back out where we were last at for Cascadia Moot?
No, they're south Halus, I think.
I don't know. I just know that, where we were at least that time, there was nothing. You had to go up to the main road to get any kind of signal. So
this place is kind of the same way, only they're in an actual field and not in hills.
Oh, well, that's so. Not my thing. But you go on with your bad self, Torin and Matt, and y'all have fun doing stuff outside.
I do want to real quick give a shout out to our Theological friends who are not watching tonight because they are in the middle of summer stuff.
Yeah, we can talk crap about the fans tonight, and they can't come get us tonight.
It's true, but
hence the word.
At least a couple of them know where I live, so we're gonna.
Yeah, I kind of have that problem too.
So, Lauren, do we have any events to promote tonight?
We do. Unfortunately, someone forgot to get me their event information before they left to go play in a field. So,
I know the event. And
yay! So the last weekend of the month is going to be the Stone Shore meetup at Schulte's. It's on a Sunday.
It is at Schulte's,
and
it's at Schulte's in the University District, and it's an obscenely long meetup. Like, I think we show up at like 2, and typically we don't leave till 8. So come enjoy decent food, decent beer. Try to get a word in edgewise.
And then next Saturday is the Blackberry Kindred monthly meetup at Cregan's Irish Pub in North Little Rock, where you can have good food and good beer instead of just decent, where Josh is going to be.
It's decent by Cascadian standards, which means by Arkansas standards, it's the best food you've ever had.
No. But anyway, it's good food. It's great company. You get to come out, and like going to one of these events, you get to meet 2 Heathen Talk Network hosts if you come out to our events. So I'm going to be there, and Ben Wagner will be there. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to seeing everybody. I'm totally going to, we go, we drink, we have like good Irish pub food. We talk about like real heathen stuff. And it's like the discussions that we've had lately have been just like knock your socks off. It's been really cool.
The discussions in general and the events that I've been going to have been of a much higher caliber than I was expecting. But just like if you are in Arkansas and you want to meet Lauren and Ben, if you're in the Seattle area and you want to come out to Schulte's next weekend, you will more than likely meet me and probably even be able to meet Matt.
And if you have a ton of frequent flyer miles, you could come to Little Rock on Saturday and then fly to Seattle on Sunday. But I don't think anyone is crazy enough to do that.
We're heathens. We don't have that kind of money.
I said frequent flyer miles, not money.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Tonight, we did make an announcement earlier this week that we will be hosting of or much of the Ostrich blog Aleglad. He's decided to take down the website. He stepped back from being online in heathen circles, and he was gracious enough to let Heathen Talk host his blog content. If you haven't read it, I really recommend it. His articles are fantastic. He wrote the article on Don't Call Me Brother, and that is one of the most read articles having to do with heathenry.
What the plan is for that right now is Don't Call Me Brother is actually already up on heathentalk.com. And then the follow-up to that, more about siblinghood, will go up Monday, and then at least once, if not twice a week, depending on a lot of things going on, mainly because school just started for me. We'll have a new post until we have until we have a repository of all the things that need to be saved from his blog. I was really, I messaged him like, hey, can I cannibalize your blog and put it on Heathen Talk? He's like, sure. So I was very grateful.
It's really cool that he's letting us do that, and we really appreciate it. And like I said, his blog has been influential for a lot of heathens. He's got some basic quotes on there. It's fantastic. So tonight, in the spirit of Heathen Talk, we are going to toast Aleglad. I'm not going to use his real name because he's stepping back, and I don't want you fuckers to go find him. To Aleglad.
Yeah. And if you go look far enough back, he's actually been on the show.
Very true.
You have to go pretty far back in the archives for that one, though. So what you drinking, Josh?
I am drinking hard cider because it's cold.
The hard cider's cold, or you're cold?
Yes. No, the hard cider's cold. I am obscenely warm for the area that I live in.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we went on the air. It's been in the 70s here in Arkansas and raining for the past week and a half. It's been dry in the 80s in Seattle. You know, pretty soon dogs are going to be sleeping with cats and the world's just going mad.
True.
Yeah, I'm drinking Diet Mountain Dew because I cannot drink once again on the medicine I'm on. So, yeah, I enjoyed my wine last week, but now I'm back on the diet soda train.
It's the way it goes. So tonight, misconceptions with the gods, misconceptions in heathenry, and in general, just the way we kind of look at things and how that's been colored by general paganism and Christianity and the romanticism of the Victorian era research that a lot of us have to work from.
And I finally get to give you guys my huge rant on the Victorian era that people in my kindred get to hear about me every 3 months or so. So I'm excited.
All right. So Warren, why don't you go ahead and kick us off and send us down a path of conversation so I can get through this episode.
All right. So I am coming at this from a perspective of someone who has been active in the general modern contemporary pagan community. I went to Wilson. I don't know what just happened, but anyway, I went to Wilson Theological Seminary. I have a pretty strong background in pagan theology, New Age theology. And so I have been able to learn, I feel like I can make a pretty decent argument as to the differences. And I think the first thing I want to bring up, and the biggest misconception that people tend to have about specifically the gods, I'm going to call them the Norse gods because that is just kind of a blanket term, but pretty much I'm including any of the gods in the, pre-Christian, Northern Europe, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon, because it's kind of all falls into that blanket. And that is, the first one is that they are, that if I hear one more person say, Odin's will for me is, I might slap somebody. But I'm going to start there. The gods are omnipresent, omniscient, and have a vested interest in each and every one of us because we are special snowflakes. So there's misconception number one. Wow. And we said we could make fun of the Theodish, and one of them just logged into the IRC. So we have to be good now.
I have never once behaved just because someone was watching me. Anyway, continue.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where I want to start my talking point is. Misconception number one. The gods are omniscient, omnipresent. And by the way, the word omniscient is so hard for me to say. And personally vested in each and every one of us. To sum that up to something smaller, that we have personal, intimate relationships with the gods. Usually, Odin is usually the god that tends to get put in the personal relationship category, not unlike how many people relate to Christ, or how a lot of Christians relate to Christ, or to or a lot of modern pagans who pretty much are all Wiccan influenced speak of their gods.
Yeah. So, I mean, we see it quite a bit on the subreddit when people come in and like, what's Odin's plan for people? What's Odin think about the fact that I and wear an eye patch? And misconception for a lot of new heathens is that are as involved in our lives as the Christian God is, or as God and Goddess are. And that's generally not true. There are obvious exceptions. If you are someone who has the weight of worth to command the attention of the divine, if you are someone who is going out of their way to get the attention of the divine. But in general,
yeah. I've said this before, and I will say this a million times probably before I die. I don't want the attention of the gods, because I've read enough sagas to see that unless you're a king, that's really not a good thing, because usually doesn't end well for the person who gets the attention of the gods. Because usually there's a task for you, and that task, well, let's put it this way, usually people end up dead, or, not my idea of a good time when it comes to my family and my tribe, is to get the attention of the gods like that.
Well, so, and again, that's another one of those things that, and this is probably less about the gods than it is about heathenry in general. There is, for a lot of people, this idea that heathenry is a monolith. All heathens do things the same. All heathens view the world the same way. And, the prime example would be view is very much different than a Cascadian heathen worldview, which is going to be different than a Arkansas heathen point of view.
Well, and I would argue that and because I have been called out a Theodish, even though I can call it Theofish if I want, a Theodish point of view is going to be different than an Anglo-Saxon point of view, is going to be different than a group whose influences are primarily continental Germanic versus those whose influences are Icelandic. There's that part too. In as much as there's regionalism, there's also what source material you are pulling from.
And the way the the gods are approached and viewed, and this is something that has, as far back as the first go around with Raven Radio, Bill Lindsay mentioned this. The gods change depending on who and where they're worshipped.
Yeah.
Bill Lindsay goes to the Ostrue summer camp in Europe, and Donar in Germany is different than his Donar in Mexico or Texas or wherever the hell he's living now.
I just want to state for the record, if anyone would like to fund to send me to Ostrue summer camp, I would appreciate it. Because I kind of want to go, just for the chance, just to have the experience, just to have the exposure.
But anyway,
yeah,
let's get back to some specific misconceptions and how they affect the religion. Because in reality, when you have a misconception about it, changes the way you worship the divine, which changes the way you interact with the religion itself.
Well, I think, like I said, I think the fact that the idea that the gods are omnipresent and omniscient is probably the single biggest misconception about the gods that is to the detriment of those who believe it, who are heathen or call themselves heathen. Because if you see them that way, you don't fundamentally understand the tribal worldview. You can't see the gods that way and also embrace the worldview. They're counter to each other.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I mean, this is a much more difficult topic with two people than it would have been with three.
Yeah, I know, but
kind of want to give Torrin crap for that. So
yeah,
but specific misconceptions about the gods, right? You have the omniscient, omnipresent thing that a lot of heathens grow out of. They learn to accept that our gods are limited in scope. He is limited in scope, right? But beyond that, you also get the misconceptions to their nature, where it's assigning roles to the gods, saying that Odin is just a god of poetry, or just a god of war, or just a god of kings, or Thor is just a warrior who fights Jotuns, or just a friend of the people, or he's a friend of the people because he fights.
Or he's just the god of thunder.
Which is another one that's fairly common. And I think that this stems a lot from, goes all the way back to the Romans and the way they categorized foreign gods, trying to pigeonhole them into Roman deities, right?
I agree. And then also I think a lot of times where it comes into play, at least in modern purvey, is, when I was in high school, we had a mythology 9 weeks basically in English, and we learned, Greek, Roman, Norse, and in modern education they teach, well, Odin is Zeus is, they teach those correlations between the gods.
Yeah, and my point was that these limitations get placed, and I think a lot of it is relatively innocent. It's a way for us to understand part of the nature of a god. And that's helpful in the beginning, right? Because it's helpful to understand the god of the dead. But if you stop learning there and you carry that perception through and you start teaching perception, you end up with a very dumbed down is the wrong word, but a very narrow interpretation of who the gods are. Rich has pointed out that compared to a human is still vastly more aware than we are.
Oh yeah.
To the point where, you might be able to say that Odin has qualities of omnipresence.
But they're
because
yeah. Well, I mean,
but
yeah.
Assign the qualities of the most common ones would be the Christian gods into the Germanic gods.
And I think something that's very interesting with that is the fact that sometimes I think that it can be a struggle having grown up in this particular culture where there is such a push to have a personal relationship with God. Then you come into something where that's not there, and there can be this kind of backlash against it, this idea that all of a sudden you're no longer a precious tribe of God or child of God, or but then you suddenly, once you get past that and you discover the much more rich relationships you can have with, the whites and all that, then it becomes, I think even better, but that's just me. I'm biased, of course, being heathen.
Well, naturally.
Yeah, I mean, it's just but that's definitely a big one. Another one kind of in that vein, yeah, look at that, definitely the idea of the gift of, and this is the gods kind of, it's also a heathen misconception, but I'm going to dive into it anyway. And I've brought it up before, is the idea of a vending machine deity. Well, Thor is the god of storms. So if I go outside and I pour this beer out, my house will not get destroyed by a tornado.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and it's in the kind of the same way, insert prayer, get back stuff that I was raised with in Christianity. I mean, it's this idea that if I do this kind of meaningless thing, I'll get what I want.
Yeah, and
it doesn't work that way.
I can understand that misconception because heathenry places such prominence on the gift cycle, and the gift cycle is I give a gift, you give a gift, right?
Right.
And so the idea becomes, well, I gifted a bottle of beer so he would spare my house. Well, you gifted Thor a bottle of beer. The weather's the weather. The weather's going to weather.
Right. Because Thor is not sitting up in a control room in the sky guiding every storm on the planet. Thor is not a giant, we do not live in, what was that movie with Jim Carrey where he was like a Truman Show. Truman Show. We do not live in an art. We don't live in the Truman Show. There's no producer in the sky controlling everything. And so, I mean, to me, that's really important and really cool. To me, it's cool that
this is going to be a rough episode. I can feel it.
I'm trying here. You know what, Josh?
Anyway.
Let's just talk about misconceptions in general, because, I think we need 3 people to talk about the gods. So, misconceptions in general that you've seen this week. What you've seen this week that we can tell people they're wrong about?
There's been a few. Whether it's stemming from, being a heathen is really simple. It's just like being quote-unquote country. Wisdom in heathenry being nothing but, into martial wisdom. So, you have a martial artist who has a bit of wisdom that applies to martial arts, but seems to think that it applies to the religion that he has as a whole. you really have to stretch the metaphor to make it apply to anything outside of sword play or Aikido.
I think I'm gonna throw one out here that I think is really. We'll start with like the big, most basic one. Heathenry is all about the warrior, and it's a big, manly man, burly, machismo culture, and women should be subservient, and but men should go out and kill things and fight and drink and be, all of the horrible stereotypes of a Viking.
Right.
I,
That's one of my favorites because you see people who, oh, I'm a Viking now. One of my favorite instances of this was, well, this is a religion of Vikings, but I don't want to join the army because I can't serve the queen. It's Christian. I'm like, well, if you want to be a warrior in today's world, guess what? You are going to serve in an army typically run by a Christian. It's the way our world is at the moment.
my joke on that was, well, you could always go join the French Foreign Legion. They don't have a queen.
It's true, but then you'd have to fight for the French.
But, that's an answer. That's an answer to go join an army. Yeah, I mean, the idea that you have to be in the military or you have to do X, Y, or Z and be heathen is pretty ridiculous.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, heathenry is something we've talked about multiple times on the show. Heathenry has great respect for the warrior caste.
Yeah.
That of itself is not a warrior religion.
No.
It is a religion in total. Second here, Lauren. Entertain the people.
Okay. So I'm gonna go into one here, and that is I'm going to go into one specifically for women, and that is the shield maiden concept. I'm going to be honest here. The role women played in battle and warfare is really not very clear. There's conflicting evidence, but this kind of romanticized idea that women went out and were women. I don't know. It's just like this idea of like, I'm a Valkyrie, I'm a shield maiden. Look at me, and this kind of over sexualized Victorian inspired thing just irritates the crap. And it really does. Yeah.
Brief interruption. Can you send me the join link?
Yeah. No.
I can't blame you. I wouldn't send it to me either.
Well, I'm gonna send it. I'm a little nervous of why I'm sending you the link, but I'll send it to you.
Because I'm making an executive decision as the boss. That's why. Don't you love it when I do this?
I'm trying to figure out how to do this because I don't very normally.
Should be in the top bar. Anyway,
Yeah.
So
I got it.
The Shield Maiden issue is one that's another one of those things that kind of follows the same logic as to me. Well, maybe. Are you really, really special? A Shield Maiden wasn't just a woman who picked up a spear to defend her home. She was a female warrior to go toe-to-toe with the best of them.
Yeah.
Pretty special individual. And so, yeah, it's something to aspire towards. Absolutely. Be special. Be wonderful. Don't assume you're special just because you have blonde hair and, can kind of sort of lift a shield.
I mean, I'm special because my mom says so.
everybody's mother says they're special. Only my mother was right. So what else do you got, Lauren? What are other common misconceptions?
I've got a misconception that Rich Culver's joined us. I don't know what's up with that. God, am I hallucinating? I think I'm hallucinating.
I invited Rich onto the show because this show works best with 3 people.
It does, and I have to admit, I am glad that you're here.
I was invited, so, you know, everyone.
You're not like Torrin, who just shows up. Who shows up and we can't, you know. He just showed up, so we kept him. So let me ask you, what misconception about heathenry annoys you the most?
I guess for me, it's the overall Viking motif, and the everything. You know, that the people just everything has to be. Oh well, I liked the Vikings TV show. I like this Viking movie, this Viking movie, this Viking movie. You know, even when they're looking at archaeological stuff, they'll say, "Oh, it's Viking." No, it's Vendel. There is a difference. Or this is post-Viking, but yes, Scandinavian. That's the kind
Viking.
Yeah, well, that's what Vendel is. That's what I meant by the example. Or they'll look at Sutton Hoo and say, "Oh, that's Viking," and it's like, no, it's kind of 150, 200 years before that age technically starts. And then what that does to the exposure of heathenry broadly annoys me, because it either brings in these big old bubbas. Oh, you know, I'm going to wait till I'm in my 50s, and then I'm just going to go find a bunch of people and start a fight and go to Valhalla so I can go out with, you know, standing on my feet types. And sadly, I've heard those kind of people. And that's what gets me. There's so much to the nuance and to the culture and to the expectations of what a person was. You can talk. And yeah, my wife just came in. Who the hell are you talking to?
Hey, Dan.
Yeah. But anyway, but you know, when you see the descriptions of the great people in it, it's, you know, they're artists, they're poets, they're farmers, they're craftsmen, there's so much things that could be to it, and then they overlook other things like stanza 71 in the Havamal, which is the one that's essentially what I call the, you know, the handicap stanza. You know, that it's better.
My favorite.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too.
Blind Girl loves that one.
Yeah, and so they just forget about that. That's the thing that probably irritates me the most is just how much everyone's taken one little segment of time and has played it beyond tolerable stereotype anymore. I mean, it was one thing years ago, you know, back when the AFA was advertising the Pack of Soldier of Fortune. There might be somewhat of a forgiveness. It's a new movement. People are looking for something. It's kind of that whole new age woo thing, but people were looking for it in a warrior, you know, they were kind of looking for that. They wanted something, you know, with new wave of liberal, of progressivism and feminism and stuff, something that was still okay to be a man.
Well, and for me, I think the Viking motif, where it really loses its charm, is the fact that it feeds into the neo-masculinity stuff, where they're essentially women just belong in the kitchen or wherever, and they don't allow for even men to express less than hypermasculine sensibilities.
Completely ignoring all of the evidence to the contrary about women's roles in pre-Christian times.
Yeah, I mean, and to some degree that is because they'd never wanted to learn enough about the cultural aspect of the faith to get beyond what was largely a fundy Southern Protestant view on how the family should be. All they wanted to do was gloss it up with some warrior gods, but they otherwise didn't change. If you took away the religious aspect, a lot of them, their early house behaviors, particularly towards women, were no different than some of the fundamentalist, like say Baptists and other southern, very southern Protestant groups that expect submission of women. It wasn't much different. And that they'd be wenches now, holding horns. But that's the extent of it. And it took much longer as a movement to get assertive women in to say, no, this is what my role is. I mean, even my wife isn't all that assertive, but she got in there and said, no, I've done this research. This is not only the spooky stuff that women do, as I lose my ability to speak modern English, but this is what women did and can do. But here's the other cultural stuff. I mean, to some degree, along with others, but when kind of the second or third wave, if you want to call it that, fetish belief came around with Daniel's group, Brian's group, when I was involved with it and stuff, it was people like my wife that started carrying and started doing, caring about the stuff that a lot of guys were frankly overlooking. Like Jennifer and a lot of the women came up with the notion, looked at rituals and saga pieces and symbol pieces about, the washing of the hands coming in and making sure you're greeting people so they can wash themselves. All the guys knew that intellectually. We saw the description, but we always thought about the social part of something like symbol or ritual, and we didn't always focus on the hand washing or other the welcoming issues, because that hasn't normally been the cultural case, and that is a very strong and stark role of the feminine and heathenry, but it took a long time to come out.
I think that is super important to bring up, and a lot of the work that your wife has done has been really pivotal in allowing women like me places that we have within heathenry now. And though she and she's a big one. There are several others that have also done this, and I think it's so important because there was when I've been heathen adjacent for the better part of 16 years now, and I stepped away from a lot of modern heathenry in the mid 2000s because I got tired of the machismo bullshit. I'm like, if I want to deal with this, I'll just go back to the Baptist church.
Well, I get that to an extent. I mean,
it's better now. It's so much better now.
Well, here was the different kind of part for me, because I even had I didn't really see the level of machismo, but I'm also coming from a guy. But here was the difference for me. Is that when Daniel and I formed Otheland, and then then we were under Normandy. Normandy is Druk centered, and that type of stuff. Well, I guess to put a nice spin on it, I'm an egghead, but I've always been the support person. And in any other society, people would look at me and say that for the most part, I do the feminine role. If you're going to, stereotype, because I was a stay-at-home dad for 3 years. I've been mostly a part-time employee, driving school buses, substituting, stuff like that, so I can have days to run stuff for the kids because Jennifer's the breadwinner. And she has always brought in the money, and she's always had the greater sense of ambition to further herself, so she always did better with her master's, she did better with her PhD. I struggled even to get my bachelor's out of the way, and stuff like that. So I even caught crap from some guys in different circles in that time period, and it can. But at the same time, the problem is that calling people on it sometimes just led to some really irrational stuff, and that was probably a contributor to that kind of ethos at the time as well. I remember even back in the early 2000s, well, even 1999, when the Texas Ostrich League existed in Texas. Yeah, and every other month it was public challenges to fight for your honor, or my honor. Again, you have slighted me, and it sounds like Klingon drama. I guess that's where that type of stuff takes me is that when everyone talks, it sounds like they're trying to be Worf, and that compounds with the Viking only type stuff. Now, but I will say that even with the warrior culture now, you've got people like Daniel. I mean, he's my blood brother. I'm always going to speak fondly of him, even though sometimes that does cause a slight difference in worldview with us. But he is trying to bring out the richness, and for him, the warrior aspect is not about how can I beat the crap out of somebody. It's being prepared to do so, but it's also about being healthy. I mean, he's now joined the cult of CrossFit, so that's a whole different thing to go into. But so,
well, you know how you can tell somebody is doing CrossFit.
They tell you
exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, but he's brought a new spin onto it that hasn't been there, because when you're around Daniel and his men, they might have casual conversations, joking to semi-serious about, preferred calibers, type of gun to hold, what yada yada, what what better hand-to-hand thing is. But it's always a very intellectual discussion, but they aren't braggarts about what they are. And I think that's the difference between that and the stereotypical, still persistent heathen notions that we still have today. Like my wife and I were talking at dinner today. We were talking about that. I've backed away from much of the community just because the level of concrete thinking and what I perceived as general idiocy just got to the point that it wasn't worth the investment of my time. She goes, well, we had our moments where we were stupid too. And I go, I know, but we had an excuse. That was back in the time where you couldn't get this stuff. No one has that excuse today.
Yeah, I hate to sound like the old lady, but man, like the amount of effort it took for us to get books and whatnot in the early 2000s or even the late 90s for like you and Ben, these kids today got it good. I mean, we had to do like interlibrary loans.
Well, but some of that also with the new brood of heathen that are coming in, some of this is dealing with the fact that culturally we have a greater access to information, but a lower training in discernment. And I'm not going to say it's a public school thing, because my wife was a public school teacher, taught great kids, taught advanced kids. There are a lot of great teachers in it. But as a culture, people just want whatever's the easiest to grab. Even back in our day, you had to go pick a volume out of the encyclopedia that your parents had on the bookshelf. You at least had to make some effort, and in general, something like the Encyclopedia Britannica, while not without its biases, still offered a lot of just good, very general information, which you then could feed off if you developed an interest. But now everyone wants to take everything in, and they don't have discernment. It's like when I hear about Edda studies, which gives me shivers as it is. And everyone's like, well, we've got 16 translations of this. And it's like, but there's no discernment. You're hoping that you're going to find a midway point between all of them, but those 16 could be based on one edition, and you may never be getting the straight story. And so...
Yeah, that's kind of funny that you have brought that up, because I have been talking with some of mine, and one of the things that I want to do over the next year or so, 2 years, is come up with a, because a lot of times one of the things that I hear is, well, there's a whole bunch of us, but nobody knows anything. So I want to personally come up with something that I can say, okay, here is a basic one-on-one level curriculum you can all study together. These are good books, good translations, good sources. These are reliable things that you can build a foundation on.
Yeah.
And I also, but the discernment thing, I do also wonder if that has to do with us not adapting fast enough to the amount of information we suddenly have available.
I think it's actually, as much as most people don't want to admit it, I think they're overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's like the drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, and the thing is that when you get so much information, it would be like, this is where teachers, the teacher-student relationship, whether you want to call it Lord Thane, Lord Thrall, elder to student, this is where it comes in. A good teacher doesn't tell you what to see there, teaches you how to see the path on your own.
Yeah, I mean, that's been, I think that the phrase that we use here quite frequently is at the knee.
Yes.
And which is oddly enough something, another thing that agenda we push here. So.
Yeah, and that started with, gotta love it, theism.
So, when you say that, what actually comes to my mind and why I like using it? What comes to my mind is not theism. What comes to my mind is the mythology I learned, or the stories I learned, or the family culture I learned, sitting there and listening to my grandparents and my great-grandparents.
In the context of the
Heathen movement. I mean, that's why
I get why you're
using it. That's why we use it, because to me it has to do with elder to.
But even in the original Thadish context, they meant it. I mean, yes, it's Lord Thane, but they also understood it in the student-teacher relationship as well. But kind of going more to the focus of the show for tonight. You already addressed the Buddy Odin thing starting off.
Not just the Buddy Odin, but the let's replace Jesus with Odin in much of the way they used to in those old commercials. Let's replace coffee drinkers with Folgers crystals and see if they notice. It's the same kind of idea. Let's replace Odin with Jesus and see if he notices.
Then again, I guess the fundamental problem that I'm gonna have with this, the core issue that we're ever gonna have with heathenry trying to move forward, is we have right now, I believe personally, we have too few teachers and way too many people willing to be good students. Everyone wants to do this, I can learn it all on my own. And, it kind of does go back to the "you're not boss of me" type thing.
Wagner's law of heathen interaction.
And, and the occasional spurts of anti-intellectualism in heathenry, which, has been an ebb and flow, and some of it's been pretty bad in that regard. But until you find people, I don't go and teach anymore. I'm a good teacher. I know how to take very complex material and break it down to where people can understand it. I can explain, at some point I'm supposed to go down and meet with my blood brother and meet his men and work, some of them want to work on Old English pronunciation. And I can do that in a very attainable, understandable way without, making the brain go into seizures because, I'm using such technical jargon. That's what a good teacher can do. A good teacher doesn't just lay something out and go, ha, I'm great. The teacher's trying to find a way to make a student understand. But the student also has to want to understand. But I won't teach anymore because every time I have gone out and taught within the community locally or even broadly, I'll see my exact, and not just my verbiage, I'll see my exact wording being taken as somebody else's gospel a day, a week, a month later, and often outside of the context that I originally said it in. So I did. Jennifer and I both taught a rune class at one of the local pagan UU style churches here in Dallas that also happens to love good old Galena quite a bit. We did that whole month thing. We got, quite frankly, shat upon. They were supposed to, offer a place for our kids to play. Instead, they put some old woman who was homeless in where the kids were supposed to play, and whatnot. And so Jennifer and I had to tag team on the class because I would do the history part and the linguistic part, and then she'd come in and do the esoteric. But that was the only way we could watch the kids and organize the class. But then it's like we go through all this, we give them the best information that we possibly can without giving too much away, and whatnot. It was still fairly dry. Well, then they decide to do one on their own, trashing what we do, and then they just go and pick up Diana Paxson's Introduction to Rune Book and decide to make a self-study class on that. And it's like, well, if you're going to go off to somebody else just because they have a name, because she helped with the Mist of Avalon series, or she helped
She's a recognized published author.
Yet if she were here to talk to them personally, she would even tell them honestly, you need to listen to Rich and Jennifer.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind. So I won't do it anymore. The only way. Because even now, Jennifer has her side groups, but as far as an actual heathen functioning group of our own, we no longer have one. And I have long said that the only way I will teach anyone anymore, it has to be a teacher-student relationship, preferably in a Theodish-like manner. But it has to be a give and take relationship with set expectations, and and it's not something where I just give up everything. I don't give up everything right off the bat. It would have to be earned, and it would be a slog, and I have to see progress. If I don't see the progress, then I'm not going to bother. And so that makes me, a cold fish in the broader community, because they're like, oh, well, we love hearing you, we love what you share, but they don't do anything with it. And so now I really do expect, the gift for the gift thing. I'm no longer volunteering my time on that. But that's where your greatest problem with the misconceptions of gods is going to come from. Too few teachers, too many poor students. And when you have that situation, you can't break worldviews, because they'll either come to us from very universalist, duotheistic, New Age traditions, or they'll come to us from monotheistic traditions. And as you say, then all they're doing is putting a heathen veneer on everything that they were raised with. Until you can break worldview, and it's a physical breaking. Make no misunderstanding about that. I've seen it, particularly in some of the harshness of thraldom within Theism. But I've seen it in others. I've seen it in myself. It is a physical breaking of because once you break it, it manifests itself in a new physical reality for you. And that's where the problems go lie. Until you get that, then you can't get a deeper understanding of God. So now there's going to be variations on what a deeper understanding is. But at the baseline problems that heathenry has in conveying even a coherent advanced theology in most of broader society today, it just won't. everyone's going to be looking around going, it's either a comic book character, or, as you were talking about earlier, the whole the gods are puppets that you put up, and you pull their strings when you, oh, I'm working with runes, I need Odin. My brother and I, many years ago, always talked about, and I talked about it even in one of my first theds. We talked about the notion that just because, even if you want to take a semi-literal context, just because he is the most associated with runes, it does not mean that the other gods do not know them. And so that each god has its own mysteries. There's not just one mystery god. They're much more full. And when you look close enough at the mythology and at the lore, and from low level folklore all the way up to high religious mythology, most of the beings as we know them have some type of defense or attack warriorship. They have some type of priestly thing that they do. In other words, they're like us. They're well-rounded, and whatnot. But again, that's a change of worldview. You have to have that broken, or you can't do any good.
Well, so that leads to one of my personal pet peeves when it comes to the misconceptions, right? When you limit the roles of the gods to just one or two things, there's the common phrase, as above, so below. If you're pigeonholing your deities that should be much more full and more rounded, you end up pigeonholing yourself and you don't grow.
No.
You end up stuck in a rut.
Well, particularly if you start with the whole patronage thing. I'm this way because of my patronage with X god. So it does become, and I was in that patronage trap. My wife loves to make fun of it. I had like 4 or 5 patrons when I first started, because that's what I was reading. And then, of course, I grew out of it.
Okay, pre-2008, everyone did, and anyone who says they didn't is a lying liar who lies. Hello, Daughter of Frey was my username on many a forum.
Yeah. So you rightly get into that. When we limit the gods, we limit our own status of being, and therefore we can never make a complete social construct in our groups, because you just don't get the depth. You can have a very maternal personality and be a woman and still be a fierce defender. That is still a warrior aspect. Maybe it is not the outward aggressive, but that's what the Druk is for. The Druk is responsible for being the outward aggressors. Like the original perception in the U.S. Constitution at the founding, the U.S. Navy, along with the Marine Corps, were meant to be our external arm, and then the militia and the army being bound to the house, so that maternal kind of defense. And so, that's what a lady is. A lady is not only a servant. I mean, you look like Welctheo. Her name means foreign servant, literally taken. But she also spoke with absolute power and authority that her husband did not try to take to her in our exemplar. Admittedly, that's that's an epic tale, so you're not going to see the everyday squabbles of a couple. But she has that assertion, and she's clearly setting the tone of her and her husband's hall. So if you call yourself a warrior, but all you want to do is prove that you can beat the crap out of people, you're not a warrior. You're a thug. Because a warrior knows how to defend. A warrior knows how to teach. A warrior knows how to love, because love defines what he hates and what his goals are with the exertion of force. I love my children enough to hate pedophiles, and I want to pound the crap out of them.
But I don't, because I love my children enough not to go to jail.
Yes, yes. Well, for the right crime against my children, particularly my daughter, I'm okay with jail time.
Well, but I'm just saying, in general,
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
just going to go
yes.
beat up a random pedophile
Yeah,
Well,
that
and
has
that's
never
the
seen your
wisdom part
children.
of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not going hunting for them, but at the same time, a priest can be defensive. It may not necessarily be completely. At one point when we were working on our weapon craft in the early days of Ophiolin, I have an iron taboo, but my brother gave me a quarterstaff, or somebody gave me a quarterstaff. I believe it was Daniel, and so that was my defensive weapon, my job. Whereas the Drook's job was to defend Ophiolin as a total, I in my part was to defend the altar. And stuff like that. So every role has multiple points to it, and that's what people get. I mean, they go into the back of Kaveldov's book, early Troth stuff, and it's like, well, we must have a steersperson. Oh, we must have this treasurer. We must have a priest. Oh, but we have to have a separate Vitki. Oh, and then we have to have, it
And the
becomes
thing is,
ridiculous.
if you want to run a national nonprofit organization, you probably need some of those things. But for your average, everyday heathen group, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the difference between like a big organization or something like that, and an actual religious group.
Yeah.
The thing for me, it becomes the thing for me, and the thing I think that is interesting, and something Josh brought up kind of brought this to my mind. I think that okay, so ugh. I hate to use the term universalist because it gets used so many different ways. So I'm just going to use the universal God and goddess principle, kind of, where all gods are one God, all gods are part of one God, all goddesses are part of one God. And so when you do the whole pigeonholing of, God of justice, God of blah blah blah, I think it definitely draws a lot on that kind of Neo-Wiccan theology. That, all gods are one God, all goddesses are one goddess, and you're just calling out an aspect of a being when you're,
Well,
I need Freya for help with my love life, it's basically denying the agency of that god or goddess or their existence.
Well, that's because, in many ways, because we don't have a continued tradition, I almost get universalism more than I do some of the other stuff, or mythic literalism. I almost get universalism a little bit more.
Let me ask you which type of universalism you're talking about, because there's 3 different ways that people use universalism and heathenry.
Well, okay.
I want you to clarify for me.
The two ways I see universalism used in heathenry is there is universalism as social construct, which is counter to folkish. Then there's universalism that is theologic, which most people tend to point to as there is a greater sense of one, and all of these are aspects. So I'm using this in the theological context.
Okay, because there's also universalists in the sense that heathenry should be everyone's religion. So
to me, that goes back more to the social aspect.
Yeah,
because that always came up as a counter to folkish.
Right, but the difference between the two being, heathenry should accept anyone no matter their background, versus heathenry is like Christianity. I guess the difference between a tribal and an evangelical religion, universalism, as far as this should be the only religion.
I guess.
This should be the universal religion. That's actually
Anyway, so I get universalism on a religious level to some of the context because we don't have a continued tradition. We're relying largely on edited non-native texts and observations, putting together what we can. But when you have things like Freyr and Freya, I meant those are titles. We're no other titles. They're not. So we don't know what their actual if they have a holy name that they use otherwise. We use Frere and Freya because in that particular culture, within a particular region, that was the taboo proper way to portray them. It's like down in the Alpine region, the Grimm brothers noted that at one time there was a Caesar to go with Tsu, or what we would call Tu and Tia. And so, which again just means God and Goddess, quite literally. And so I almost get that. And whatnot. And the problem there, somewhat to your agency thing, but it also impedes a truly polytheistic view.
Right.
Because you can have 10 people in a room with some variation of William. They could be Will, Willie, Bill, Billy, Wilhelm, whatever. And they will all have the same name, but they will do different things, and they won't always line up. It's like saying that everybody who goes by the name Dad is the same person. No, I'm clearly a very different dad from Daniel, than I am from my own father, and from his father. But it's just kind of that general thing. I think to some degree that's why in Europe, using some variation of just a generic God noun as opposed to a much more specific one, probably also made it a little bit easier to embrace, because now it's this general abstract as opposed to necessarily specifically big guy with a white beard and a throne. So so that leads to those issues. And some of that's just what I call the rabbit hole. It's like, okay, so we can do all this linguistics exercise and find out all these different gods that have some variant of theos, whether it's deus, whatever, to going through all the cultures and stuff. And because in some circles they're always looking for that, as Daniel and Brian will say, older is better. I do think sometimes you can go too old. Almost every one person I see who goes back to looking back for some larger construct of, some version of Woden, or yeah. Oh, I mean, going into the pie. I personally think that's a much more beneficial thing on a linguistic and material culture level than I do think it's on a theological level.
I know a lot of people who they consider themselves to be practicing the Proto-Indo-European religion, which I find incredibly odd, but,
Well, and I get that what they're saying is that, well, there was this mass of people, and all of these other masses of people came out of these masses of people, but a lot of the similarities come from the limits of human language itself. And so when you have so many masses that are related linguistically, they're only going to have so many terms to express a particular type of broader concept. And so they have certain epithets and terms, even if the names don't always line up, for certain type of chthonic mystery beings, whether it's Mercurius, Hermes, Woden, stuff like that. So there the names don't line up necessarily much, but a lot of the epithets and the roles that are played. Whereas other ones, you're dealing with a lot of taboos and how that changes. But again, this goes back to my point earlier. It's all about good teachers, poor students, and discerning information. And if you don't have people to pull you back from your rabbit holes and to keep you sliding all the way, it's good to go explore. They should never keep you from exploring, but if you don't have something to pull back to, you need someone there at the other end going, "Come to the light, Carol Ann." So you have that.
So I want to go back to something that you talked about, because I think this is actually important, because we keep talking about the good teachers, good students. and how you mentioned that you are not going to, you don't invest in teaching the general public.
Mm-hmm.
I don't either. My general, honestly, at this point in my life, if I'm going to put the investment into teaching you, it's because you are within the process of joining my kindred. Because I only have so much energy and so much time, and so that's been my general idea. But I do think that more of us need to be doing that kind of teaching than broad. I'm going to go teach at a pagan festival teaching, because quite frankly, I think most of the time when you do that, that's just like wrestling with a pig. You get dirty, and the pig enjoys it.
Well, the dilemma there is then that gets into a completely different show topic about attracting, pulling in, finding people that you then want to pull in and then invest time in. That's a whole different thing. So how do you reach out? The only way I can
we've done shows on that. Yeah, we're good. So
yeah, the only way I could actually think about that, and the only way that it's done is to actually take a metaphor from good old St. Paul. He, in his original letters to the seven churches, the original seven churches, instead of going so much into the whole Great Commission, he talked about you must be lanterns in the darkness pulling people to you. And so we need more lanterns. And instead of being bug zappers, we have so many bug zappers out there. We have so many people who call themselves teachers who can't teach, but they pop up a .com and they publish a bunch of damn heathen books, or supposedly heathen books. Most of it's rehash of somebody else's heathen book, and then they get acclaim for it because I know that people value the doers, but you could be doing wrong the entire time.
Well, there's such a thing as being a useless doer. If you're the dude who just takes the rock from the left and moves it to the right and never builds a wall, you've done nothing.
Well, and to me, I think that I like that idea of what you say here. We need to be lanterns and not bug zappers, and because heathenry to me, and the goal and something that my kin we have talked about is I want to have something that is so good and so right and so amazing that other people want it. And to me, that's what we have tried to build, and that's what's attracting people to us, is that we have something that other people see. They see what it's done for us and what it's doing for us, and they want what we have.
Yeah.
And
I do want to address a question that's in the IRC coming from Robin. People have different views of the gods, literal beings, metaphorical concept, yada yada. Do you think religion as a whole needs to nail down one interpretation, or can these views be accepted under the same umbrella? To really answer for you, Robin, and for others, that's going to depend on the group dynamic and how the group learns together. If you have a whole group where everyone sees them as metaphorical, well, then that's how your structure is going to come around. That's quite honestly, that's what the Asatrua Theological in Iceland is. They see them as metaphorical and constructs of nature. They're not actual believers in the deity of the gods, and they're just building a visitor center is what they want everyone to show up to. It's not really a temple, but they're making it work for it. However they want to do it, that's how they're doing it. So that's going to depend on your group dynamic. Does one interpretation need to be nailed down broadly for heathenry? No, and it can't be done. And the amount of air and angry typing that would be done on the internet, while it might be entertaining for a while, it just wouldn't be worth anyone's reading. Just wouldn't.
And I think I'm going to have to agree with you. To me, yeah, I mean, to me also, I think it comes down to what I believe um, is not nearly as relevant as to what my group believes, and how that's going to be what affects what I believe, or not what I believe, what I practice, what I do. So, of course, I'm not going to take this where it could go, but the fact of the matter is, there's many interpretations, but I accept. Okay, this is the interpretation my tribe embraces, and so even though intellectually I might believe differently, I'm going to act as if this interpretation is the correct one and engage in my right action based on that.
Well, and to add to it, there is one place where one interpretation has to be there. That is in front of the altar.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you believe that heathens should have priests or not, in front of the altar, whoever is the transmitter between the profane to the holy has to have one single mind towards how they are going to do their relationship with the gods for as an intermediary for the or as not as an intermediary, but like I said in my language episode, as a law speaker, as a lawyer between the gods and the folk. That it's kind of like having a court case. Everyone in your defense team might not agree with what one might want you to cop a plea. Some might think that you're genuinely innocent. Some somewhere in the middle. But when you go up there and you talk to the judge, you have to have one defense thing, and that's the same thing as the altar. So that would be the one place where you have to have one interpretation down. Now, is that to say that from Easter to Midsummer, and if somebody, because some groups, what they do is they rotate households, and so the heads of the household do the ritual at each one. So at their altar, it might be done differently and conveyed a different way as a person who did Easter if the person's doing Midsummer. But as long as the message at the altar is consistent and willful and focused on the holy, that's what's important.
Right, and it is, like I said, it's a right action, not necessarily a right belief. Mm-hmm. That really is heathenry. I think that's the important thing to remember.
I disagree. I do believe that belief is equally as important as action. I do think now it again not broadly. I don't want 100,000 people doing what I do because they'll just jack it up and I'll get grumpy. But within the context of smaller group dynamics within learning circles, again, if you have a teacher-student complex, or if it's heathen, a theid, a kindred, a tribe, broadly defined, you do have to have a right belief, because right belief determines right action. If you don't rightfully believe that what's being offered up is a proper offering, well, it doesn't matter if you properly offer it. If it's not a proper offering in the first place, then you just ginked your entire ritual.
Well, but what I guess I'm trying to come in is, if you come into a group who is offering right offering and you aren't at the point yet, to me, it's the point I try to get across when I say that. It's not necessarily about how you feel. It's not about feelings as much as about doing when I say that. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know that I feel X, Y, Z. Doesn't matter. I don't feel like going to work some days, but my butt goes to work, because if I get fired, that's not good for my tribe, because then I'd have no money, and you get the point.
Yeah. But I guess that's all of these issues are always going to be hard within the context of discussing heathenry, because, as mentioned earlier, a lot of people believe it's a monolith, and it's not in the remotest sense. I meant, and it's not even honed down to what particular ish or ism you are this week. It's not even honed down to your regionalism. I mean, as it has grown and as studies have gone, people are getting down to really, hearth-based heathenry. And it seems like a lot of, and the more advanced that people seem to be getting in their analysis of the lore, traditions, language, and stuff like that, that they're even throwing quite a few assumptions that you may have had as a beginner, or in the kind of assumptions that you would find in a beginning book or a beginning class, and just throwing them totally through the window, and are still heathen. They're still culturally heathen. They're still linguistically heathen, and I dare say they are religiously heathen. But it is in a new context and understanding, which is part of what has to happen. Because again, another misconception of the gods is, and it goes back to my Viking bro statements earlier, is that sometimes we get too focused on a reenactment-like notion of what our belief system should be. What mythology and what lore is, and all of the ancillary stuff around it, the core of it is the foundation of a house. And so what little we have left, we still have to build on. But the lore and the myths themselves are a framework. Well, but in our day and age, just like they would have built materials according to where they were. And so we had the same things. We have our interactions with our ancestors and our whites that are always going to be varying. And it's not necessarily because of whites are only associated with one chunk of land. I honestly believe you can bring yours along if you move, and whatnot. But it's just, once you learn the worldview, again, once you break yourself of the old worldview and you have your new worldview, then those are the eyes you see with. You can respect and honor and venerate your ancestors. You can think about their practices, but it's you living it, it's you doing it. And so your experiences and your observation of right and thuful and proper custom are going to alter with that. And perhaps maybe that leads, but if you don't have the worldview broken yet and then rebuilt, but then you move on to do something that you think is surrounding you, whether you choose to, pick local artwork as a depiction form of your holy stuff, as opposed to using, maybe something right out of Wilson's Viking Age art book. If you don't have the worldview broken yet, you're just putting another veneer on top of it. It doesn't have the substance. I've broken off from a lot of the main branch of the tradition, and I do a lot more cathodic stuff, dealing with the dead ancestors, the cult of the dead, the mysteries. For me, looking at that broader Indo-European mystery notion, which I do think could be helpful, again, because I'm looking at it in a little linguistic way, but it does inform my religion, is that there's that kind of large spanning association of the dead with mysteries and how the mysteries are expressed through language, whether it be in inscriptions or just the age of words. Intentional archaicness, but because I've gone with that, it's not just a veneer for me to make a pseudo-skeletal idol piece. It's not a cultural appropriation from Texican Day of the Dead stuff. It's based off on my own historicals. It's still a European expression, because I can go through and look at the Cult of the Blessed Dead development from pre-Christian days all the way up. But I have that there. But I know what the icons, the metaphors, and the language mean to me. Whereas in a lot of other groups, they'll see similar things. Maybe they're in a very cultural center themselves and want to express that as part of their identity, but those symbols have not taken on a new religious worldview yet, so they're just slapped there. if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I definitely understand. So I'm going to interrupt here because we got 5 minutes left in the show. And Rich, I just want to express my thanks for you coming on the show. I know it was last minute, and you really came through and provided great conversation for us. And I don't know how time passes this fast whenever we have you on.
Well, I appreciate it, and if I can come in and help, as long as I'm useful, I don't mind being a useful idiot.
No, seriously, next time, if I ever get to meet you, I owe you a drink.
Oh no, it's fine. Hopefully, we'll get around to meeting each other someday. But really, it's one. My wife knows that I'll just keep talking anyway. But I enjoyed it. I'm glad I can get on and help. As you said, it's nice to have multiple voices when it's just a dialogue. Maybe it's not always as stimulating, and why abuse people in chat when I can do it in person? So.
Exactly.
And I will actually be in your neck of the woods before long, so I will buy you a drink soon. If I can't convince you guys to come up to Winter and possibly see you before then. So
with our schedules, Jennifer. Well, this is completely off air.
Yeah, we'll talk about
our schedules. Yeah, our schedules, and I'm restarting school because I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm getting a second bachelor's in German and a master's in teaching. Because
that's actually really cool.
I'm in school too, so I feel you.
Well, because of the glory that is Texas sports, being an alt-cert candidate in a glut field of history without a coaching certification, you can't get hired that well. So I'm going back to do something more that I enjoy. I'm hoping to still do history, but I'm also hoping to teach German. So
yeah.
So with our last 3 minutes, I just want to let people know we nailed down a name for our other series. It's Questions and Answers with Heathen Talk. If you have questions on this episode, any of our old episodes, or on any topic that you think we're interested in, shoot us an email, detail your question. We're going to be reading the questions and answering them in short 5 to 10 minute videos that will come up whenever we get the question answered. It's not going to be a set schedule. It's going to be as the questions come in. We're still working on getting the answer to the other question up. But look forward to that soon. And Torin and Matt will be back next week, and I expect everyone who hears this episode to show up next Saturday and give them a hard time.
Yes. And go to our Facebook page, like us on all the 8 bajillion social media sites we're on. Harass us. We really appreciate it. You want feedback, go to Facebook, email us. We are around. And always, heathentalk.com. Don't Call Me Brother is up, so go read it. We'll have more stuff.
It's a fantastic article.
Oh, it is. I think it's probably like the article I have posted on Facebook more than any other Heathen article. And then also we also have T-shirts, swag. If you want to support us, you can go to Patreon. Just we have a lot of cool stuff on the website. You should go check out. So do that this week.
And Rich, do you have any projects you're working on you want us to pimp out for you?
Oh God, no. As far as heathenry goes, I'm quite frankly still coming off of kind of a 4-year in the woods type thing. I haven't done ritual. I haven't written a ritual, liturgy, or anything in that amount of time. So I'm still kind of easing back on the religious aspect and whatnot. So no, I don't have anything, and Jennifer's hopefully going to be turning her dissertation into a book soon. So
can't wait for that. That'll be awesome.
Yep. And if there's topics that people want to hear me talk about, and you guys want me on, or you need an extra third, shoot me a message. So
will do. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you're doing it wrong.
You can't start it that way, because you are the boss of me.
But I'm not the boss of Rich, so we'll take that as what it is.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not wrong. I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right.